Back in the days when I was doing a 9 to 5 job, the 9 to 5 job that I thought I had to have and didn't like, the only two things keeping me sane were weekends and holidays. But they're just sticking plasters. If you don't like your job and you're living for the weekend and those couple of weeks in the sun a year, you need to, if you can, try and reconsider what you're doing with your life. And I reached a point where I couldn't do it anymore after I'd done it for about 17 years, working in offices, like hating 5 days a week, living for the weekend, looking forward to the weekend on Fridays, and spending Sunday dreading going back on Monday. And lots of people live like that, lots of us live like that. The sacrifice with not doing that is that obviously you have less money. But I don't need holidays anymore like I used to. I haven't been on holiday since what I would consider a proper holiday since 2017. And I don't miss it. I don't miss the money it costs. I don't miss all the preparation that has to go into this very small amount of time. I do 2 weeks every quarter down at my parents' to catch up and see everybody. And the other thing that I do, of course, is my little car camping trips, which I started doing last year. And it's something that I haven't quite mastered yet. Last year was a bit of an experiment. I was trying to work out how I could comfortably sleep in a very small hatchback. It's a 3-door hatchback. Excuse me. And I just need to perfect how I'm going to do it. I tried 2 methods last year. One was to put the passenger seat down, and these little cars have huge front footwells, and if you lay the passenger seat down, because I'm only 5'4", it's the perfect length for me, but it's just making it comfortable enough to be able to sleep on. I'm a fidget, that's one of the problems. I will toss and turn all night. So I was getting impaled on the seatbelt catch, on the handle on the passenger door. But when I did that, I hadn't got the whole thing properly laid out. It was an experiment. And then the second time I went, which was later in the year, I tried to sleep in the boot. I laid all the back seats down and tried to sleep in the boot. And I can't sleep just curled up. I need to stretch out because I have sciatica in my left side, and the pain that runs down my leg if I can't move around and stretch is horrific. And I had a really dreadful night, so that doesn't work. So for my first trip this year, I'm going to go back to lying on the passenger seat, but I'm going to do it differently. I'm going to do it better so that hopefully I can have a more comfortable night. I have some other challenges though this year which are going to affect car camping. One is that I now have days where I have to work for other people, and instead of being able to just pick the weekdays that I want to go when I want to go on these trips, and I always do it weekday because I don't want to catch weekend crowds. There are certain days in the week where I'm working, so Tuesday and Wednesday are out, and then I do 2 cleans at the weekend, and I can do those across Saturday and Sunday, or just on the Sunday. So I need to be able to fit it in around that. And the other problem I have is that because I don't do car camping very often, I haven't really got into a habit of being comfortable with it. So I'm still quite paranoid about it, and I don't sleep properly because I've only done it twice, so I'm not familiar with how it feels. And I did one car camping trip last year where I was out in the middle of nowhere. It was like a a camper van stopover point, but it was a really horrific night weather-wise. It was gale force winds and driving rain, and there was no way anyone was going to get any sleep that night. The second time I slept in a town, I feel more comfortable sleeping in built-up areas, because if something happens, there are houses around, and if I needed to call for help, I could. But that, of course, comes with the paranoia of someone knocking on your window or someone seeing you. And of course, you've got to find somewhere where it's going to be okay to park, where you're not going to attract attention, because stealth car camping is what I do. I'd rather hide in plain sight. So there's all that to consider, and the problem with not getting settled overnight and not being able to sleep is that because I am a woman of a certain age, certain things are catching up with me, and I am in like a perimenopausal stage at the moment, and most of my symptoms are very, very low level. But the one thing that I need to keep an eye on is the headaches I get. So there are certain things that trigger headaches in me. Alcohol, dehydration, and not getting enough sleep. And the problem with the headaches is they're not just like, oh, take a couple of ibuprofen and it'll go. These headaches, they last for 3 days, and they are absolutely crippling. I had headaches last year where I couldn't even get up off the sofa. I couldn't look at light. I couldn't look at a screen. I couldn't hear noise. It's like a migraine, and it affects your entire body. So it would leach all my energy out of me, and you'd ache, and it was just absolutely horrific. And that's something that I'm likely to get when I go on car camping, because I don't get the full number of hours that I need to keep these headaches at bay. And because, of course, I'm working as well during the week and at the weekend, I need to be able to plan my trips with enough time when I get back that when the headache kicks in, I have enough time to recover from it to be able to then do the clean. So that is just how it now is. And that's why I don't like working for other people, because it just gets in the way of everything. Anyway, so those are my challenges. My car camping trips are very much focused on certain things. So I don't just stick a pin in a map and I go. It needs to be within a reasonable distance, because petrol costs money and travelling time takes time. It also needs to be somewhere that I have an interest in. And what I tend to do is I will do my car camping trips based around the genealogy research that I do, because I'm a real genealogy nut. I love researching my family history. And last November I had a bit of a breakthrough with a brick wall in my family tree, and now I know exactly where I want to go for my first car camping trip this year. And that is Keswick in the Lake District, where I've discovered I have a whole branch of my family tree that until last November I didn't know existed. And when I go, it's sometimes I get to see actual buildings and streets where people lived. Sometimes I'm just hunting graveyards for final resting places and just taking lots of photos and just filling in the gaps, because that's what I love to do. That's my idea of a road trip, is to go and have a look for where my ancestors lived. And I've done some fabulous trips, really, really enjoyed my trips. I've been to the lake, up to the Lake District area before. I've been doing it since about 2019. The first time I went was up on the borders of Scotland, but I got a hotel room with Travelodge, but it was pre-pandemic. They were really cheap. It was £23 a night, so I booked one of those and I based myself on the borders and went between Dumfries and Galloway and Cumbria around Wigton, which is where some of the families that I was researching lived. Tiny little hamlets, tiny little villages, and just getting a feel for where people lived and what their lives were like. And it's really helpful when you actually go to these places. And I went in January, and it was cold, and there was snow, and it was windy, and it was wet, and it was muddy, and you thought, oh my God, imagine people living in the 1820s, 30s, 40s, working as agricultural labourers and farmers, and living in these places without the kinds of help that we have now to keep warm, like proper houses, insulation, puffer coats, all that sort of thing. They must have been incredibly tough people. So that was really helpful to me to understand why their lives were so hard, and that things were just so difficult. I wouldn't give all the money in the world to live like that. I'll go back to those times and live like that. So this year's first trip will be to Keswick. I don't know yet when I'm going. A lot of it will be weather dependent, because obviously I'm going to be sleeping in my car and nights are going to get cold. I've got a pretty good way of managing once I'm out there. I bought myself a little mini kettle that plugs into the cigarette lighter slot in my car, so I can have a warm coffee in the morning, and that worked really well. I take the food I need, and it's really picnic food, but I'm only there for 2 days, so I'm not going to starve to death. And if I get really hungry, there's always a supermarket around. If I really wanted something hot, there's always a chippy or a cheap pub or something. But I try to keep all the costs down. All I really want to spend when I'm going out to these things is the petrol there and back, because I don't have the budget for hotels or pub meals or anything like that. And I'm really going to look at these places. It's not about, eating meals out and having a few drinks and all that sort of thing. So I've been planning this trip since last November. I have used Google Maps and Google Street View to case out the area. I know the churches and the cemeteries I need to go to. I've picked several streets that look like they would be good for overnight car camping. But of course I won't know until I get there what those actually look like. Very often on Street View you can see if there are parking restrictions. The little signs that are up, you can often see those and zoom in on them. So I think I've picked three streets where I think I can park. So I've got 3 options there. There's a supermarket nearby, and there are 2 churches, one at one end of the town and one at the other, and the second one at the other, they have their own church car park where it looks like I can park all day, and it's a big churchyard, so it's going to take me a while to get round. So trip is planned in everything but date. So I'm really looking forward to that, and it's nice to have things to look forward to, even if you don't plan holidays and things like that. But as I say, I don't have the date yet. It depends on the weather. If the weather really turns nice, then I will go early March. If it doesn't, then it'll end up being later in April, because I will be at my parents' towards the end of March anyway, for the first of my trips down for the year. It's my first quarter trip down, so I need to try and space things out a bit. But that's really exciting. I'm really looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to tracing my ancestors, seeing where people lived. I have a couple of street names, so I have a rough idea of some of the places they lived. And when I'm out on that trip, I'll tell you a little bit more about that part of the family history, because it's really interesting where our family comes from and why things have been so difficult to research. So that really makes me excited. That gives me something to really look forward to, a little challenge. Can I nail this car camping thing properly? This is my last chance to do it properly. If this method, the way I'm planning to do it this year, doesn't work, there is no other way that I can car camp in my car. So I just need to either think of other ways to do my trips, which will be finding cheap hotels, I would imagine, or I just have to get on with it and realise that I'm just not going to get a decent night's sleep, and plan around that so that I have recovery time after that before I have to work. Because if I get one of those headaches and I've got to clean, there's just no way. I won't be able to do it because they're just so debilitating. But I'm up for the challenge. We will see how we get on this year. So that's me planning for the spring. That's the only one I have planned at the moment. I don't have any other ideas. There are other places I would like to go. I would like to go to Northumberland, but it's too far for one overnight trip. And I don't have enough days free when I could go over and do that, I don't think. I'd have to think about that. But I'm sure that as I'm doing more research, you never know when something's going to come up. It's really exciting. I love doing the genealogy research. It's probably the hobby that takes up most of my spare time. I can lose hours and hours of my day tracking ancestors using online resources, because there's so much now. I mean, back when I started doing family tree research, you had to go up to London, you would book yourself in at the family registry office, or as it started out, Somerset House, and you would literally pick these enormous great books off the shelves, and you would look down lists of names until you found the person that you wanted. Now everything's online. You can do everything pretty much from the comfort of your own home. And even really obscure pieces of information, I have found really obscure documents from the 17th and the 18th century that relate to ancestors I'm tracing. And everything's being digitised now. Google Books is really useful, and lots of local parishes are digitising old records and putting them online. It's amazing what you can find. My favourite sites are Ancestry, Find My Past, Family Search, which is the Church of Latter-day Saints site, which is phenomenal. I use FreeBMD, which lists all the births, marriages and deaths, and is also a fantastic resource. Those are the main ones I use, but there are all sorts of other little things that I dip into if I need to clarify something or I'm struggling to find a piece of information. So it's really easy to do now in many respects, and it's just so addictive. I love it. I could spend the rest of my life just researching my family tree, and it would give me enough to do. And I've researched thousands and thousands of people now, and I've got my family tree back, in some instances, back to the 16th century. And I love it because it gives me a real sense of identity. It's not just about me, it's about where I come from and all those things that make up my genetics and my DNA, and how I've ended up where I am because of my family histories. And that's been really important in building me as a person. It's given me a really strong identity. It's given me confidence. I know where I come from. I know who I am. And that's invaluable. If you're lost in the world, if you don't know what you're doing, research your family tree. Because even if your immediate family tree is a bit hit and miss, maybe you didn't have a great upbringing, a great childhood, maybe your parents got divorced, maybe your parents died young. If you go back through that tree, you will find so much more information about where you come from. It's not just about your parents and your grandparents. You are the sum of all the people that have been in your family tree. And I find that really reassuring and really inspiring and comforting, because it tells me who I am. And it's turned me into a much more confident person. I know who I am. I understand my independence, and nothing's going to change me. Not now. I am who I am. This is who I am. And I don't need anyone telling me I should be living my life any differently. So I think that pretty much sums that up. I will post more information as and when my trip comes up. I'm really excited about it. I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to be a good one. Exciting!